So been vegan for just over 6 years. I was actually vegetarian from birth until I was age 7. My parents got divorced, and then, unbeknown to me, I started eating animals again. And I I remember actually my young childhood in the late 80s, but in the 80s it was very different to now in terms of even being vegetarian then. I think there
Mm.
was a Holland and Barrett health food store within an hour of our house, and that was about it. Everything was cooked from scratch. There wasn't, I still don't think there's a lot of understanding in terms of even the basic terms, vegetarian, vegan. But yeah, back then it
Yeah.
was pretty poor. So yeah, started eating animals again at age 7, and it's actually it was actually for health reasons. First of all, I suffered from
Okay.
IBS symptoms. Probably every morning I woke up, I had some kind of stomach ache. I wouldn't eat for a while. Again, the same thing. And
Mm.
I went for an intolerance test. It's one of these holistic type things where you hold on to the magnet. And I thought, because everyone else has said it before, it must be dairy intolerance or something like that. And actually, it turns out that I was highly intolerant to pork, turkey, and a couple of other bits. And I was a bit shocked at that because I thought, how can you even be intolerant to
Mm.
turkey? And yeah, so I cut those foods out first, and literally overnight, my stomach aches went. It was unbelievable. And I then went vegetarian, so I thought it was the next step. And then first world problems, but I don't know if you've been on holiday before and you just get bored. It was an all-inclusive resort in the Caribbean, and it was kind of day 3, and it was really like proper rain, not like the rain we get here. And I just found myself on YouTube, and I need to remember exactly the thing that I saw, the video that I saw. It's called something like 101 Reasons Not to Die. It was from an American
Mm.
speaker. I'm sure he's a doctor. I'll have to get that because it's still available, so I can share that. And he just basically went through the dairy industry, the egg industry, and systematically just literally just like that changed my mind because I didn't even think of the implications from the animal's point of view. And just like
Mm.
everyone else, I had a big disconnect. So I thought I was doing enough by being vegetarian. And actually, when I found out that both the health implications and um, the animal welfare side of things, I literally overnight, literally went vegan. Quite fortunate that I was in a big all-inclusive resort. I literally went down the next morning and said, right, what can I have here that doesn't include animals? And I had, I think, loads of stir fry bits for lunch. And yeah, I was there for about another 7 or 8 days. And then yeah, haven't looked back.
Wow. So when you got home and you're off the all inclusive, so you haven't got the sort of the, if you like, somebody kind of cooking for you in that respect. Based on your sort of vegetarian background, did you find it pretty easy to transition from a nutritional standpoint? I was starting with.
Yeah, I think I'm not certainly not as a bit healthier now. I've gone more in the whole foods side of things over the last 2 months or so, but certainly do like a bit of junk food as well. So whilst that's the case, I did have originally my working life a fitness background, so I had a reasonable level of knowledge in terms of nutrition, and
Yeah.
I found one of the easiest things to do was to switch milk. I think I started with soy milk. Now my favourites are certainly coconut's my favourite, followed by oat milk. Easiest thing in the world to switch, even if you're not thinking about doing anything else. Um, and I started by just making the foods and the meals that I like to make, and just literally veganizing them because
Hmm.
um, it's easier to transition that way, and you don't feel like you're
Yeah.
missing anything. As you know, it's actually the opposite. You're eating more diversity of foods than you ever
Yeah.
have been before. But at the time, yeah, it's kind of tunnel vision of, oh, how am I gonna do this? So yeah, I found just making making the foods. I think it was in summer. So I was eating, yeah, it was April actually. So coming into summer, I was eating, I've always liked salads and kind of quote unquote healthy things anyway. So yeah, I can't
Mm.
actually remember even having an issue with it. I think a lot of the time, what people are told is very different to the reality. So many people say to me, oh, I couldn't do it, which, as you know, every vegan said they couldn't give this up, they couldn't give cheese up, they couldn't do this. But actually, so like a lot of anxiety, it's the actual reality isn't as bad as the perception.
Yeah.
So yeah, I found it pretty
100%.
easy, to be honest.
Did you have any friends and family go with you on that kind of journey? Was anyone watching that YouTube video with you?
Yeah, so my partner at the time did as well. She had a bit of a slower transition. Um, I've got a varied family in terms of their opinions on it. Funny enough, my mum has now gone vegan, again for health reasons, but also she works with animals. So again, she's had that connection for a few years now.
Mm.
But funny enough, because it sort of went the other way, because she was the one that then started introducing um, animal products into my diet and into our diet in the 90s. So yeah, she started as
Mm.
well, and then I found that just naturally I was drawn to the communities and the people, via not a great lover of social media, but one of the things that's great is you can share these recipes and different hacks and different bits where, you know, you might not know your local restaurant does this vegan option or if you ask for it this way. So yeah, it was more like that
Yeah.
really. No one particularly went on the same journey as me. Um, but I'm okay with that. I've always been, I wouldn't call it rebellious, but I'd call it, I've questioned things a lot. I haven't followed the trend most of my
Mm.
life. I haven't done things just because everyone else has done things. I have had, an Apple phone, and I've
Mm.
part of that movement for a couple of years. But then again, I stepped back and I actually looked and said, do you know what? This isn't particularly the best technology you can get. It's not really the most user friendly because it's quite restrictive. I like a lot of flexibility and control with what I do. So I've always been that type of person to kind of question the norms. And so that's why I found it, I appreciate a lot of people have a much longer transition into
Yeah.
veganism. Some people, it takes years, but for me, I think where I sit on the kind of spectrum, if you like, is um, I'm certainly more, I'm certainly not, I wouldn't call myself a sort of a hardcore activist, but I do have my moments where I do get frustrated at certain things that are said. I do question things, but with my business, for example, I always part of my elevator pitch is I do help pre-vegans as well. That's all I think of. You're either pre-vegan or you're vegan. There's no non-vegans really, because we're all pre-vegans at some point. Um, so yeah, that's kind of been my journey really, not only on the vegan side, but in general. I've always been the type of person to question things, and I'm not afraid to do things that are a bit different.
Yeah. When did the financial advice, the wealth management start for you? Was that pre-vegan or was that post-vegan?
So yeah, it was post. I guess it was just about post vegan. So really non-traditional background. Couldn't have picked two uh, more different careers really. I started in fitness, so I did the usual like working in a gym, in a swimming pool as a lifeguard. Did aerobics at some point, believe it or not. So I did all of those bits, personal training. It took 2 years, but I got managed to get into the fire brigade. I joined just before I was 20, and I joined there in London. And the pure reason behind that, if I'm honest, there was two reasons. First of all, I wanted to get back down south because I've always been an Essex boy, and my mum moved us to North Lincolnshire, which is quite a big cultural change, especially at the age of 17. So I literally just looked. I'd had about a year of college. I didn't really, again, maybe my sort of rebellious, questionable nature, didn't get on that well at college. What I did like doing is more the vocational bits, so the lifeguarding, the fitness stuff. I, I qualified in that, and yeah, it was just at the time, at first, what can I do with the limited qualifications I have that is going to support me um, when I moved back down to Essex? Because there's no ifs nor buts. I was going to do it. So the fire brigade ticked that box because it paid enough to do that. It was a secure job. But actually, in that 2 year period, there was a lot of different goalposts to meet and a lot of boxes to tick. And the more I understood and found out about the fire brigade, the more I really um, aligned myself to that in terms of
Mm.
the fact that actually you're making a difference. It's no 2 days are the same. I'd go stir crazy if that was the case. I couldn't work in a traditional office. You'll probably hear soon, but my business, although it's financial service based, it's very non-traditional anyway. And yeah, it was just that sense of achievement and sense of really helping, or what I thought was going to happen, where you'd get that real job satisfaction and that stable career for life. And unfortunately, I mean, we're hearing it now at the moment in the news about the train strikes and various industries, and I'm always on the side of that. There's two sides to the story, and not to go too heavily political, but the government, not a lot of people know, but all of these, a lot of people know that the news isn't 100% balanced. It is quite biased, to say the least. So the things that you're hearing are a certain agenda said in a certain way, either to invoke anger or frustration or fear. But a lot of people don't know that the government actually has, they hire PR experts. So all of these things you're hearing about, that you've ever heard about train drivers and the fire brigade and police, and
Hmm.
all of these assumptions that people make about their pay and their conditions and things, those are all fed in by a PR mechanism. So there are two sides to every story, and yeah, unfortunately, when I soon after within a couple of years, I realised that actually it's not about what people perceive the firefighting to be. It's a very small percentage of actually doing the job and helping people, making a difference,
Mm.
and that side of things, which is the bit that I loved. It was more about, unfortunately, box ticking and saying that you've done something and demonstrating it on paper was more important than actually doing the thing. And that really
Mm.
grated on me, if I'm honest. And the fact that there's very little control when you're there. Obviously, the nature of the job, you have got to be quite regimented, because if you're in an emergency situation, you have to follow a certain thing and work together and do things that you're told to do. Um, but again, often those things sort of weren't common sense, and the things that you had to do on a daily basis were being outweighed with um, the common sense element was being outweighed by that. So yeah, I found myself increasingly
Mm.
frustrated at various elements to the role. Conditions. I know they water it down on the news and say, oh, they're striking because of pay and conditions. And you might think, well, what can that possibly be? But there's so many different things that you have to do in any job that can be changed and manipulated and changed for the worse. So these things, obviously, most people join these type of careers to be there for life. They've got a lifelong commitment, which is a big thing for people. I think the average now is in the private sector, maybe people stay 3 to 5 years. I don't know the
Mm.
stats, but that's got to be about the average. But obviously, fire brigade now is a 30-year plus career. So yeah, when you're in that sort of bubble, if you like, and then you're told this is going to change, this you're not going to get this anymore, and it's not just, well, I'll go elsewhere, because it's the fire brigade, right? It's
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can't change it, so there's no other option, and it does really impact. So yeah, so that side of things, I found increasingly frustrating, and yeah, to come back to your question in a long roundabout way, I always had a fitness passion and interest. And there's a company called Vitality, which, if anyone follows football or
Hmm.
any other sport, they're very heavily advertised. Vitality health insurance, life insurance. I looked into it myself. I got covered myself because I thought it was a good thing to do. Um, and I then started training to become a specialist in vitality. So essentially, it was more of a general insurance, they call it. And then after a while, I think it was around 18 months into it. Unfortunately, the structure that I was part of, it wasn't quite, and this is not against any multi-level marketing company, but it was structured in a similar way. So it was, a lot of people were
Right.
doing it for the compensation and the money, rather than doing it as to why I was doing it, which is to actually, again, make a difference, um, educate people on, you know, I still do it now with basic things like life cover and critical illness cover. It's very small percentage of people have it, but it's actually a very small percentage of people that don't need it. Most people, it's a massive gap in knowledge, and the amount of people that need it versus the amount of people that have it is very small. So that side of things was first, and then remember talking to a mortgage advisor, looking at remortgaging at some point, and he was talking to me about the different elements of the changes that were coming in. You can actually hold a buy-to-let investment mortgage, and you can do it in a limited company, or you can do it in a personal name. And me, with my sort of nature of wanting to research everything to the nth degree, I actually got really interested by it. So the average person maybe not that interested in finances, but I've always had that sort of interest. And the vitality side sort of taught me a bit of both, because it was, for those of you that don't know, a fusion between um, the wellness side and the insurance and finance side. So the idea is, I've got one
Hmm.
here, you can track your steps and have fitness tests, and the more you um, get active, the idea is, in the next 20, 30 years plus, the likelihood is you're going to be less likely to have a critical illness. So it's win-win
Yeah.
for the insurance company. Um, but yeah, with the mortgage side, I literally just asked the guy, how did you get into this? He said, oh, I did my CMAP qualification, and within 6 weeks, around my full-time job, I'd qualified. So it's the kind of person I am. I'm very much all or nothing. I've got a number of amazing books that 99% of them I haven't read yet, but I know that if I do read, when I do read them, it will be a case of, right, I'm going to read it cover to cover probably, or a 4 hour block. Um, Consistency isn't my strong point. So yeah, that side of things sort of really took off, and then it was around 4 years ago now, 3.5 years ago, I decided enough's enough. I'm going to go into this full time. So then I started on my financial journey from there.
And that was mindful wealth.
So that initially I realized that I didn't have any experience really. I'd promoted Vitality, which is one of 30 different options you can have, even on the general insurance side. The mortgage side's
Hmm.
uh, a whole different animal. And I needed some support. So I started under an umbrella under a different company. I had really amazing support from them there, and sort of learned on the job, which was interesting. And again, it sounds, thinking back, this sounds like I'm being uh, rather negative, but it's not. It's just knowing. Do you know what? It's knowing where your boundaries are, and knowing what um, what frustrates you and what you're comfortable with. I think that's one of the things I've
Yeah.
learned in my short time here, mid 30s now, 36. So certainly looking back, that's the one thing I've learned is just being comfortable with what you're not comfortable with, knowing what frustrates you, knowing how you can change it. And one of the frustrations I have had and have with the mortgage side is it's very transactional. So I'd often help people
Hmm.
and go on a big journey with them. It's not easy in any times getting a mortgage, especially at the moment. And you help them with the mortgage side, you help them protect, their income and everything else. And that's it really. You don't see them again for a couple of years. And I found that quite frustrating. And I found essentially ticking a box for a bank quite frustrating. They all say that there's
Mm.
a common sense approach, and experience would tell me otherwise. It's sometimes quite a journey to get the clients to an offer stage, and yeah, so I found that the parts that I liked were helping clients, making a difference, um, and communicating and helping them on a regular basis, and that's when I saw the opportunity on the wealth side. So very different. A lot of people think that it's all the same, but there's a
Mm.
very big difference between a mortgage advisor and a wealth advisor. Um, Wealth advisor looks holistically, so they look at most of them do at the whole picture, whereas the
Mm.
mortgage side is a specific purpose, and you'll do that job for the person or for the couple and the family, and that's it. Whereas it's much more dynamic. So you're going from their goals, which obviously with a mortgage, it's what are your goals? Well, I want to buy a house or I want to buy an investment, right? So that's all you need to do essentially, and then look at the
Mm.
protection. But yeah, it's much more satisfying. It's much more yeah, say dynamic. You can have a lot more scope with the client to work much more closely. So most of my clients I check in, every few weeks. When I get an update from a provider, I send that through to them. And yeah, so I finally feel like I've found the area that I am really happy with, and yeah, I'm excited to see what's next and how we progress as a company.
So you decided purposefully to go out with mindful wealth with a kind of a an ethical viewpoint to apply everything that you had from a knowledge based point of view to and filter that, if you like, through your kind of ethics. Obviously that was, for maybe for you and I, that's a straightforward choice, as sort of, vegans and so on and so forth. Often those two things go hand in hand, but that's, I imagine, pretty unique in the sort of wealth management sort of world.
Yeah, it's funny actually because it's a bit like the vegan movement, right? We both know that 10 years time it's going to be the norm. There's going to be no stigma around the word.
Mm.
People are maybe, I mean, I know society loves a label, so I think there might be a transition of, I mean, we're already seeing it now with sort of different words, plant-based and things like that. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's exciting to know what's almost not being too presumptuous, but to know what's going to happen. You can see the way things are going. So yeah, so there's a lot of similarities between the financial world and the vegan world. To be honest, the, the fact is at the moment we're at the start of quite a big explosion of what's going to happen. There's going to be lots of money. Again, don't want to go back to political motivations, but there's going
Mm.
to have to be trillions of pounds invested in greener alternatives for energies. We've got, uh, whether people believe it or not, there's net zero pledges, there's huge mandates and legislations that need to be met, or at least we need to be on that path. And so we're at the start of it. And yeah, I found with when I started looking into the wealth side, it was very much the thing that I sometimes struggle with, and I know a lot of vegans struggle with, I do a lot of networking in the vegan community, is especially when they've got their own business, it's hard to have ambition that's of a monetary value. And I know that money is secondary
Mm.
to a lot of people, but at the same time, we are in a capitalist society. We need to make money in order to be comfortable, be secure, but also to really have that influence. So the way I think about it with mindful wealth is the more successful that mindful wealth is and that I am, the more influence I can have on a personal level and through the business
Mm.
from creating impact with my clients. So there's a lot of similarities with the two, really. So when I'm having conversations with people about their pensions and about their financials and about their planning, when you start to question people as to why they think that way, and people are sometimes very opinionated one way or the other between, no, I'm not interested in that, or, I haven't done that, or actually I prefer property. It's often a learned behavior. So they've found that
Yeah.
someone, not necessarily parents, but someone in their lives that they've looked up to has influenced them massively in that way. So very similar to see most people that we don't grow up wanting to eat chicken. We grow up petting chickens in a farm or in the
Yeah.
zoo. So it's definitely a learnt behaviour. And with the financial side, I found that really our biggest power, our biggest influence for most of us, unless we're some high level influencer, is with our money, is where we as a consumer is we're saying, reason why the supermarkets have got increasingly more and more amazing vegan options. There's now not only one little aisle at the back, which is a little corner. There's loads of different options to the point where actually first world problems. But I remember being in Asda the other day going, oh, I can't keep up with all the different options of where the bits are. I've got to now go round the whole shop 4 or 5 times. But we are we are powerful in our actions, and us saying that we're not interested in putting our money here, we're gonna, it's a form of activism. So with
Yeah.
regards to financials, I started looking into the power of our money. I knew that it would have an influence because it's often, especially when you're talking about pensions, if you're setting a pension up in your 20s, um, it's a 45, 50-year plan. So your money is invested somewhere for a long time. And
Yeah.
the more I uncovered it, the more I realized just how influential our money is. So I found a campaign called Make My Money Matter, and Make My Money Matters, headed up by Richard Curtis, who's quite a profound director. I think he directed Four Weddings
Mm.
and quite a few others. And Make My Money Matter really goes into shedding a light on where our money is going, and whether our money can be used for good or for bad. So it's not only
Mm.
to do with the vegan side, and we can explore that a bit further. But it's things like deforestation, fossil
Yeah.
fuels, um, arms. I hate to mention it. Sounds more
Mm.
like a political podcast, but in terms of Ukraine, people are signing petitions and they're up in arms, but they might not know that their investment, their pension that they're paying into each month is actually being invested into Russian interests. So it's really, for me, my main thing is to educate people and to help them align their money with their values, the same way as now they're eating the right things, they're not using makeup that's tested on animals, the people are more conscious of their clothing. It's just the next logical step. um, so yeah, I found that quite interesting, and I'm learning things every day. And it's just like anything else, it's supply and demand, right? So the more people that shout and scream and ask for these options, the more we're finding now that there are various sustainable, vegan friendly, ethical options out there. And just like mindful wealth, which is by the way, 100% committed to the sustainable focus. There are providers now that only look at, the carbon footprint and the efficacy of their investments for the client. So yeah, we work with them a lot, um, and yeah, it's really interesting.
For thinking about people with either an environmental focus, people who are vegan, that there's people who want to make these sound ethical decisions. For for you, I mean, it sounds like it's sort of almost criminally underlooked at the kind of the financial side of things when we think about how much attention we put on food, and rightly so. It's important that we make the right decisions in that space. But from your experience, could you be undoing some of that? Well, not undoing, but doing sort of similar things in terms of investing in animal agriculture unknowingly, just through your choice of bank account or your choice of mortgage provider or pension provider?
Yeah, absolutely. It's there are some bits out there like on Make My Money Matter. It states that actually you're up to 21 times more impactful with switching your pension to a greener pension than changing energy provider, not flying, and something else combined, recycling, all of these things that people would think of first, and switching your diet as well. So apparently but I don't use that a lot. I think that using too many stats sometimes alienates people and it's too grandiose. But yeah, certainly in terms of your impact and your ethics as a vegan, if you are vegan, it's definitely a big factor. So with regards to a pension or an investment, all it is just a wrapper. So you're essentially investing however much money into a fund, and that fund holds companies within it. So you imagine just like an umbrella, and within those companies, and we could be talking, 1,000, 2,000 companies. Are the companies invested in doing things for good, or not so much? So on the vegan
Mm.
side, obviously there's animal agriculture, there's dairy industry, there's a lot of industries that exploit animals, that utilize animals as a product. That's why I don't like using the word animal products when I talk about when I used to eat animals. So yeah, you really do have a direct impact on, or you could be having a negative impact, if you like,
Mm.
with your pension, with your where you're putting your money, for sure.
Can you give us an example with banks? I mean, this was one I remember quite early on in my vegan journey, and I went vegan for initially for environmental reasons. And like most people, you sort of stay for you come for one reason, and you kind of stay for the whole package, if you like. But I remember early on um, discovering a website. It might have even been the website you were referring to. Um, where you kind of look at your kind of choices and so on. And I remember discovering uh, some information about my bank at the time. I was with a big bank that I'd been with since I was a student, and I was looking at how much money they'd invested into the fossil fuel industry, and it kind of blew my mind. And then I was searching for another place to put my money, if you like, to put my wages every month, and found Triodos in the end, which kind of satisfied
Hmm.
my kind of needs at the time. But I'm always kind of on the hunt for, like, am I doing this right? Is there more I could be doing with banks? Like, tell us a little bit about the sort of the landscape, if you like, with banking.
Yeah, so just a little part disclaimer here. I don't officially advise on banks per se, and savings with a bank. It's all managed
Mm.
by other options. But yeah, I do get this obviously a lot when people talk about where their money's going. So I think the main underlying theme here, when you're talking about being vegan or where you're putting your money, where you're making your choices, is having that connection. So, and having that basic level of understanding, because the amount of people that don't realize that, the bank isn't just a holding facility for a load of cash.
Yeah.
The way the banks make money is they take the money that you're saving and they invest that. So we've seen it in our lifetime. If everyone went to take the money out, they did that with tried to do, a place like Northern Rock, and it it's they wouldn't be able to repay everything. So yeah, they take people's money, take your savings, and then they invest that to hopefully get a better return than they're going to pay out in interest, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, the banks, and it's not what I don't want to do is create a picture where it's us and them, because I think there's too much
Sure.
divide already with certainly a lot of the more outspoken part of the vegan community. I don't think that is, whilst I don't think we can be silent with the vegan message, I think there's a balance depending on who you're speaking to. So I don't want to create this, picture that banks are the enemy and,
Mm, mm.
it's all or nothing. But yeah, traditionally banks do hold a lot of investments um, in fossil fuels. It's just something that's, I mean, we're seeing it at the moment. There's a spike in costs, so obviously there's a spike in returns and dividends, and it's traditionally what banks have always invested in. And yeah, I guess it's when you were saying about doing better, and it's something that I struggle with personally as well as in business. It's this idea that, and you get that a lot. I'm sure you spoke to people, to pre-vegans before, right? And they say, "Oh,
Mm.
well, I can't do this perfectly, so I'm not going to do it." And
Yeah.
it's a case of, well, actually, if you can look into something and understand it and make the connection and be comfortable with what you're doing and conscious and review it, and that's the best thing you can do at the time, then that's the best we can do, right? So,
Mm.
in terms of the banking bits, there are banks. Unfortunately, is not a quote unquote vegan bank yet. Hopefully,
Yeah.
there will be. There are several options that are more ethical. So you've mentioned Tridos. They've been around a long time. They put their they have an ethical code, so they're very transparent. You can go on online, or you can request that from them, and they can actually break down what they're investing in. And there's always a lot more diligence, if you like, with
Mm.
where your money's going. Building societies as well are supposed to be more ethical because they don't have corporate shareholders. And obviously, with any corporate shareholders, any ownership structure like that, you've obviously got people in your ear, and you've got different people to keep happy. And with building societies, the idea is just like a cooperative. You're owned by your members, so the idea is you are funding, uh, the actual entity itself, and the money goes back
Yeah.
uh, into that for the benefit of the shareholders, but the shareholders are the members. So building societies are a good bet as well. There are challenger banks as well. So they talk about challenger banks. If you speak, I can mention another podcast on here, can't I? It's not
Yeah. Of course.
plagiarism.
No.
So
No. Not
on
at all.
Stephen Bartlett's podcast, Diary of a
Mm.
CEO, he speaks to both founders actually. One founder of Monzo, and also the founder of Starling Bank as well. So
Hmm.
the thing a lot of people like about the challenger banks is, again, going back to my sort of nature of questioning things and why is it done this way, is that, and I did it, I made the switch for uh, a reason of utility. It's because I was banking, my business banking was with a traditional bank, and A, I started looking into that a bit more, just like yourself, and B, I remember asking for something, and it was really something simple, and I just said, can this not be emailed to me? Like, is it, no, we've got to send you this code, and that takes 10 working days, and then we've got to send you something else. And I just thought, right, I've had enough. So I bank with both of those that I mentioned, by the way. That's not a recommendation, but it's just something to perhaps look
Yeah.
into a bit more. And they've, been on the block much less time than other banks. So it's really interesting to hear both of those sides of the story and both founders, because I mean, talk about, I mean, I'm trying to do something a bit different in my industry. It's unheard of to start a new bank. It just doesn't happen. So
Yeah.
the fact you've got those two, Starling and Monzo, they're just completely out of the ordinary, almost a miracle. But what they do is they do things very differently. They do a lot of things well. So it's all app based. Um, you set the bank account up on the app. You do a selfie and a video to verify yourself. Everything is done through the app. It's just a lot easier. There's no sort of barriers and traditional kind of waiting and control measures there. So yeah, challenger banks are another really good one to look at as
Mm.
well. And also a lot of these options are much more user friendly. So it's looking even at things like Monzo has, I think Starling has as well, different pots that you can create. So a lot of people now have, you know, their different savings accounts in different places and naming them different things. They've got the holiday bit here and the emergency, and so it makes things very easy and very user friendly, whereas a traditional bank doesn't really. Um, so those things are cool. And then there are a few places where you can. There's two sort of prepaid. I think they're prepaid cards now. I haven't looked into them, so again, not a,
Mm.
a recommendation, but it's one called Tread, which actually, when you, so the way that they make money traditionally with a card and the credit cards is they charge a fee for uh, the shopkeeper or the, you know, whoever you're paying money to. But what they do is they put that fee into planting trees. So Tread
Right.
do that, and there's another one called Novus, I believe, and Novus is a bit more um, all encompassing. So you can choose which impacts you want to make. So yeah, there's quite a few different things people can look into, but I think, as I said before, it's just not trying to be perfect, because there isn't a perfect solution with any of this,
Mm.
but it's just, and it doesn't take as long as people think. People are surprised when I go through the journey with them in terms of their pension and investments, that once you know that you can just build on that knowledge. So yeah, I'd encourage everyone just to, even if you're just mapping out, you know, an hour and just have a look through things, do your own research, make sure, you know, as we know, being vegan, look at who's writing and who's funding that said article or piece of
Yeah.
research, or, you know, who's saying that, why are they saying that, have a bit of an objective view. Um, but yeah, that's what I'd say to that.
And the more you think about it, I was reading your blog post on kind of vegan friendly investments and so on, and the more you think about it, the more um, all encompassing it is, the more sort of wide ranging. There's so many aspects of our life that, whether we like it or not, like you said earlier, we're in a capitalist society, and money is in various places, with
Mm.
our name on it. And, are we comfortable with it being in those places, and so on and so forth? And it was really, I'd encourage everyone to go and check that blog post out and check out your website, actually, because there's some great information on there to sort of take it further as a sort of vegan. But I did want to ask a sort of a more, a broader question, if you like, of, because something you said triggered the question in me. You mentioned, when you were talking about Monzo and Starling, this unheard of, to kind of have these upstarts, like, we're going to create a new bank, and it sort of created a bit of an image in my mind that we have these kind of institutions that are decades and probably centuries, I don't know. they're very, very old institutions that and like you were mentioning with the kind of PR arm of the government and so on, everything's kind of designed to work in tandem, all these systems and so on and so forth.
Mm.
And it's really interesting, again, picking up on a point you made about going into the supermarket and seeing the change, and that being ultimately driven by purchasing power of the consumer. Are you seeing, and it's a roundabout way to get to this question, but are you seeing a similar thing happening in the world of finance, etc., where there is a start of people turning towards, where is my money going? What decisions are being made in my name? Am I happy with them? And are you seeing any of those existing kind of like big companies making strides in that space?
Yeah, that's interesting because there's a number of things at play here. There's, as I mentioned before, won't get too again too political, but there's a lot of political motivation to on the environmental side. So the money will follow that, the investment will follow that. So when there's a lot of investment into infrastructure and change, then the return's going to come from there. So there's always been quite a lot of regulation around the financial industry. At the moment, there's been some big changes happening and about to happen. So the one thing that people are very aware of, that the phrase of greenwashing is
Mm.
very much uh, in very much highlighted at the moment. The Green Claims Code, which if anyone wants to look that up, there's been a number of quite high profile brands being taken to task over this. So the Green Claims Code basically states that if you're going to make a claim or a promise or a statement, there's got to be a clear, defined reason and thought process behind it. So, a fast fashion brand saying this is sustainable, for example,
Mm.
well, how is it sustainable? How is it more sustainable than the alternative? What else are you doing around this? And I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago the around being more mindful within your business, whatever industry you're in, and a big part of it is actually looking at your whole supply chain. So you might be doing the right thing here, but actually, who are you
Mm.
working with? Where are your purchase decisions coming from? Like, it's the whole sphere. So I think the Green Claims Code and greenwashing is really going to help. Uh, a lot of people see it as a hindrance, but I think it really is going to help um, clear the noise in the industry,
Mm.
because traditionally what's happened with some of the portfolios is they're just been renamed. So again, I said earlier on, people love a label. So if things are called conscious or a green investment, or you know an ethical portfolio or an environmental portfolio, a lot of people will see that and say, oh great, well that's got to be green, all right. But because of these
Mm.
legislations, and because also people are really waking up and being much more looking into things in a lot more depth now. I think like it or not, love it or not, these, social media, the transparency, the fact you can get messages out there and you can really dig into things a bit more and question things is certainly apparent in my industry. So I think people are becoming more aware of things, especially when they're even just asking the question, just saying, well, how would you like to invest your money? What's important to you? That really starts the thought process for people. So yeah,
Mm.
certainly seeing it in the industry. We've got a number of. So I work with fund managers, and fund managers are the experts in actually picking the funds and the how it gets allocated and that side of things. I deal with the client, the strategy, looking after them, making sure that all of the parts are moving correctly. And the fund managers themselves, either they're really focusing on this side of things. There's and I think it's going to go by the wayside within the next 3 to 5 years. But the common phrase in the industry is called ESG. So that encompasses environmental, social, and governance measures. So it's
Mm.
looking at a company, what's their environmental footprint? Are they doing things that are good for the environment or not? Um, what's the not only the carbon footprint, but what are the other things in play? What's the whole life cycle of, if it's a product? What's how harmful is it when it's disposed of? How long does it last for? The social element is very much about how they communicate as a company. So are they being transparent? We've seen with, I won't mention, but certain social media companies and certain big uh, global corporations maybe are saying one thing, but maybe acting like they're doing another in reality. So social element is huge. How they're and also within the governance section, it's how people are treated. So it's, are people being paid a fair wage? You know, is everything outsourced to a country that doesn't have proper facilities or um, employee rights and things like that? Governance in terms of, you know, is the money that's coming into the company just being paid out to shareholders, or are you actually doing something, you know, positive with that money? So the ESG side of things has been around for a while. I think, as I say, it will go by the wayside, but that's the main metrics that are used in the industry. But people are, yeah, becoming much more aware of ESG. They are asking questions, and the process I go through with them really helps educate people in that, and hopefully kind of spread the word. And like with, you know, as you know, the vegan movement, the most powerful thing really you can do is talk to others about it and about your experience and what you're doing that works for you. And as you said, a lot of people won't do something until someone else has done it first. So it's that effect really.
Jay, it's been an absolute education. I've learned a ton. It's been great chatting with you. Where would folks go to find out a little bit more about your work, mindful wealth, etc.?
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm across all social media. I think most of them, even TikTok, and the handle is Mindful Wealth UK. So it's all one word. And the website is mindfulwealth.uk. I'd say out of everything, and I really didn't know this until I spoke with one of the people that's helping with our strategy. The main focus at the moment is LinkedIn, which you'd expect a little bit more corporate, but also Instagram. So we're doing a lot of visuals. We're going to start doing
Yeah.
reels and hopefully some conversation pieces like this, just to get the word out there and help. But yeah, you'll see a link on the website. There's a discovery call link, and I probably speak to 10 people a day, and not all of them I can help directly, but you know, that's fine. If I'm starting to plant the seed for people, and even like you mentioned earlier, a few basic bits of advice, and then they come back when they're ready, or you know, spread the
Yeah.
word, then that's my job done.
Amazing. Jay, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I'll pop all those in the show notes so folks can come find you, and hopefully you'll have some people come to chat to you. But really appreciate it. Thank you, Jay.
No worries at all. Thanks.